Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Lawson.
What's up, Kent?
Dude, recording podcasts with Lawson is not just that we get a podcast done, it's the process of doing it that's actually quite fun. I enjoy it. Although I would tell you that the tech setup for this particular episode was a little dramatic. I mean,
it wasn't my fault.
We had Hunter who couldn't be heard. We had Lawson yelling at people, asking why their names were what they were. It just got a little out of hand back here in the podcast kitchen. However, in the dining room, it's smooth as silk, man. We just skate out on wheels.
Hey, check this out. Talking about technology, dude, I'm so excited that on the Manhood Journey website, if you go to the podcast area, there's a new button that can be clicked. And it's really cool that we get to interact with listeners on this podcast journey with us. So dads, check it out on the website. What is it again? manhoodjourney.com/podcast.
I was not going to mention that because I am forgetful, because you're exactly right. manhoodjourney.org/podcast. That's podcast. I don't know why I said that twice and so weird, but Manhood Journey /podcast. And here's the cool thing. There's a button and you can tell us really anything. You get a few minutes to talk. But here's what we'd love to hear. Right now, we're kind of in a season. It may last a month or two or four, however long we decide to keep it up. But we're in a season where we'd love to hear a challenge that you have as a dad. We'd love to hear a challenge you have as a dad. And it doesn't mean we have an answer or we can make it all go away. However, we'll at least put you on air and make fun of you a lot for whatever challenge you have. At the minimum, it's a bare minimum. No, what we'll try and do is, let's say for the sake of argument, we get 100 people who tell us what their challenges are. We'll pick some softball that's easy to knock out of the park and we'll put you on air. And then Lawson and I will address that. For all the super difficult ones, we'll send those to somebody who has some actual skill and see where that goes. Because one of the things that we would love to do, all kidding aside, we would love to hear what you're kind of walking through right now. It helps us craft content. It helps us figure out what episodes. We have this long list of episodes we'd love to get to one day. And I'd love nothing more than to never get to those episodes that we think are important, but instead get to the episodes that we know for sure dad listeners out there care about. That'd be awesome.
I'll also say, if you do that and it fits with an episode that we know is coming up, then don't be frustrated if you leave a message you don't hear it the next week, because the timing is not necessarily going to line up week to week, or we may compile 2 or 3 into one episode that's on a certain subject, and there's a kind of a gathering of input from you guys out there who go and do this. But it's right. Just scroll straight down and you'll see clear as can be the button with the question that will change periodically.
Yeah,
so
and if you've got your cell phone, you just can mash the button and start talking, and it'll record right on there. It'll send it straight to us.
That's gonna be so good, seamless. Man.
If you don't mind, as you do it, I don't even know if we put these instructions on there. Tell us your name and tell us where you are on Earth. It'd be fun. It'd be fun just to know, especially if your name is Lawson and you live in Florida.
That'd be true. Yeah. We need to put that on the website, like a little bit of
what, your home address?
No.
Speaking of home address,
good. Try to find
from some temporary apartment today.
Me with all the moves that we've done. Somebody in the IRS is looking at us going, I don't know, man. What is this guy?
Lawson's in the witness protection program. This is really not his actual name. We made up this whole fake backstory about a business career and his fake wife and his fake daughters. It's all a mirage to protect the innocent. Lawson, so today, here's what we're going to talk about. This episode will go live right around Thanksgiving in the US, 2021. And it's a bit of a buffer episode in between. We just finished a series on our ebook, Survival Gear. Feel free to go download that on our website. And next week, if you're listening to this right when it airs, the next episode, we have a special guest.
By the way, happy anniversary. This is our 20th.
Wow. What does he wish we had?
This is our 20th episode.
My anniversary's in April. I
didn't think we'd get past 4.
Maybe we shouldn't have. Maybe the last 16 have been long.
You were about to intro our awesome, incredible upcoming.
I was going to
guest.
say, as we've done a few times, we've not told people exactly who the guest is. All we've said is it rhymes with Chip Ingram. We're not going to tell you who the actual guest appearance person is. I don't even know how to say that. But his name rhymes with Chip Ingram. Man, we were pumped to do that interview with him. And there's just one golden nugget wisdom after the other. Episode 21 will be with our friend Chip Ingram. So tune in next week. But in the middle here, what we wanted to do was we just finished a series that was 7 or 8 weeks long. We're going to have this one with Chip coming up in early December when it all goes live. When this one goes live, it's going to be right around Thanksgiving. And I'll tell you, Lawson, I know a lot of dads who really wrestle with being thankful. And I don't mean that they walk around every day going, I'm just not going to be thankful today. But what they do is they walk around very stressed about their life. They might be embittered about a relationship. They may be frustrated with a coworker or a boss. They may be unhappy with their relationship with their spouse. They may be frustrated with their own children walking through different seasons of life or behaviors or whatever. And I know a lot of dads who really wrestle with a lot of negative situational dynamics. In some cases, they have deeply tragic current situations that are also really troubling. They may have lost a spouse. They may have been given a really bad diagnosis. But those are probably a little bit more exceptional. And what I mean by that is even for the guy who's not walking through a really troubling or difficult major life situation, we can sometimes really wrestle with being thankful. So what we wanted to do with this episode, Dad, if you're listening, we wanted to talk about what does it look like to be a thankful dad? And really, why does it matter? So for example, you may buy into the idea that you could be a thankful dad or a more thankful dad. The question is why? What kind of ripple effect or what kind of indirect consequence would it have if you were a more thankful father? Lawson, talk to me about being thankful.
Yeah, and what you just said made me think about my daughters. The times when I have gone through some season of life or whatever, or just a moment or an extended moment where I was caught up in something and was lacking in gratitude, lacking in thankfulness, it takes a toll on the people around you, because when you are, what's the opposite of thankful? Thankful, I would say discontent, unhappy, craving what other people have that you don't. Be around a person like that long enough that is just living there, that gets heavy. And so as a father, to your friends who can say, dude, what is your problem? Like, buck up and remember that where you are today is where you wanted to be 2 years ago, or whatever. Your buddies can help you snap out of it. Your children may not. They may not be old enough or wise enough or whatever. And so your burdens lay heaviest on your children. And so having a who said attitude of gratitude? Was that Zig Ziglar or somebody like that? You know what I'm talking about?
Probably. Oh yeah, that's a great one. It's either him or John Maxwell. They seem to own every positive inspirational quote in the last 50 years.
Yeah. When you're living in that kind of attitude of gratitude, be around a person like that, and you will feel, you'll leave every interaction feeling better. you too will begin to adopt those ways. We just finished the episode on discipleship and having your children as followers. When you're walking around with a dark cloud over your head, that cloud is impacting your kids. And when you aren't, when you're a breath of fresh air and a ray of sunshine and reminding them that where they are in life and what's going on in their world and what's going on with you guys as a family is something to be thankful for, that just helps in every area of life.
You reminded me, Lawson, just now of a story. I was fortunate enough to be able to go on a trip to Israel a couple of years ago. And I went with my wife, April. And one of the coolest parts was we went with about 35 or 40 other folks who have some kind of a mission type job. They may be missionaries in a foreign country, or they may work in kind of a nonprofit context like I do. And it was a blast. We had super fun. And one day I remember we were up near the northern part of the country, and we were sitting down having lunch. And I was sitting next to a guy named Dan Spader. And now Dan has been literally all over the world. I don't know how many countries the guy's been in. He's been everywhere. He's pushing 60, 70 years old and has done trips to Israel for 20 years. Like, just the guy is so well traveled. And as we were sitting there, I said to Dan, I said, "Hey man, where's your favorite place on earth? Like, you've been everywhere. Where's your favorite place on earth?" And his answer was both really interesting and a little bit convicting. He goes, "Wherever I am right now."
Oh, wow.
And I thought, wow, what a great perspective. And here's a guy who literally, if you're around him for any length of time, he just radiates joy. Like, I would sense he doesn't have a deep, deep struggle with being thankful, because he seems always to be thankful. And that perspective of being like, he could have said anywhere. And he said, wherever I am right now. And I just thought that was powerful, man. And I'm often looking at the next thing or where I'm going to go after this. And I miss the momentary opportunities because I'm just too focused on the next thing.
Yeah. Wow, man. That's, I hear of guys like that, and I'm like, oh, all right, whatever. I can't be that. But boy, do I want to be, because like you said, that's like, who do you want to be around? He must attract people that everybody that leaves his presence is like, oh, I want to be around him more and more often. And then, like I said, in the context of our kids, I didn't think you were, I love that answer. I wrote it down. That's something for me to strive for, kind of probably knowing I'm not ever going to just be like, oh, well, just wherever I am. That's just the best ever. But it's worthy of trying. Do you know Bowen Titchener?
Yeah.
So Bowen at one point he and Lindsay, his wife, and all of their children left Louisville and moved to the Dominican Republic, and not near the resort. There's a couple of places where there are resorts. Most of the country is not at all like that. They actually live kind of between the resorts and the border of Haiti. And Bowen and Lindsay for years lived there, homeschooled their children there, and went out and about the community putting in water systems. And he and I kept in touch over the years while they were there. And eventually, to line up a mission trip to go, I went first, like 6 or 8, maybe even more than that, maybe a year ahead of time. And on that trip, I took Abigail, who at the time was in her young teens. We lived in their house and played with their kids and ate dinner at their table and just lived with them for like almost a week maybe, and went out into the community and learned how to help Bowen put these things on, at the top of they always had to go on at least a story or two up above the structure. So second floor of a school or a church or someone's home or, a little apartment community. And that was humbling, not just to see Bowen and Lindsay and their family living so far out of their comfort zone, but also to go out into the community and understand the depth of the level of gratitude for being able to turn on a spigot and have good, clean water come out. And I certainly can't say I'm that guy where every time I turn the water on, I'm just thankful. But I think about it a lot. I think about how easy it is for us to have good, clean, safe drinking water because of the impact that God had in my life.
Yeah.
Abigail and I talk about it periodically too. We'll remember back. And so I think all of that to say, there is some value in establishing a perspective of thankfulness that can come with stopping in our tracks, taking a pause, like you said. You're always wanting the next thing, and just taking note of your situation. And look, I'm like you said, I'm not talking about the guy that is out there struggling, and maybe there's been a childhood death or a spouse death or sickness. That's on a different scale, and I would never assume to think that I can put myself in the shoes of someone who's trying to find thankfulness in a situation like that. But on the day to day, like, let's pause. And part of it is taking stock in where you are and what you have, and in your family, and your relationships, and making the effort. I think there's a bit of a, you've got to learn. It's a practice. That guy that you just mentioned, what was his name again?
Dan.
I bet you he didn't start there.
That's probably true.
He's probably over years has come to learn through doing that. That's a much happier, better place to be.
Hey, Dad, do you wrestle with anger? Man, I sure have, and so have thousands of other dads in our email list. And so what we did for those dads and for you, we built a special digital course called the Anger Free Dad. This digital course is chock full of almost 50 assets, a bunch of teaching videos, a ton of PDF booklets and worksheets, so you can walk through and understand your anger triggers, the expectations underneath, and how to pull those out of your heart and mind so you can be a dad who is less angry and more at peace. If you take this course and you do not become less angry, you will get all of your money back. Plus, we'll send you some boxing gloves so you can beat up the wall at your house with all of your mad anger. Dad, come take the Anger Free Dad course today at manhoodjourney.org/anger-free-dad. That's manhoodjourney.org/anger-free-dad. Well, it's interesting you bring up Bowen, because April and I took the boys down to DR as well to see them at one point. I think our sons were 10, 8, and 6 plus or minus. And we took 3 of our boys down with us when we only had 3. And man, it was a really impactful trip, because you do realize, man, you got a lot to be thankful for. And it's not just because you compare, they don't have drinking water and I do, but it was just really cool to see Bowen and Lindsay making that leap and taking that step, and doing all that work down there was awesome. And it makes me really grateful for the traffic I have in Louisville, because there's nothing like traffic. Oh my word. We were in hours long traffic to go 2 or 3 miles. It was hilarious. I'd like Lawson to take a moment and just share a couple of scripture verses that can help dads on this kind of journey toward thankfulness. And I think you texted me one earlier too as well. One is in 1 Thessalonians 5:18. And it says, "Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you." Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. And as we've noted already, some circumstances are a little harder, not a little, some circumstances are way, way harder to give thanks in. Even so, God never tells us to do something that he doesn't give us the power to be able to do. And so if he says, give thanks in all circumstances, then somehow that's possible, even though sometimes it seems very difficult or even improbable. And then the second verse I'd like to share right now is, "And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." This is Colossians 3:15, "To which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful." And in this little stretch here in Colossians, Paul is connecting this idea of being thankful with the peace of Christ. And so sometimes as we look at concepts on our podcast, we look at the opposite concept. So if you're stressed and frustrated and discontent, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, what's the opposite of that?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that would be very closely aligned to being thankful is this idea of being at peace. being at peace. I am content with my circumstances. And man, sometimes that can be very difficult. And I'll tell you, my wife has actually made amazing strides in this over the last, I would say, about 10 years. She started keeping a journal based on a book she read once upon a time by, I think it was the author Ann Voskamp. And there was this Greek word in the book, and the Greek word was taken out of the scripture, and it's the word Eucharisteo, and it means gratitude or to be thankful. It's one of the common Greek words used in the New Testament for the concept of thankfulness. And so actually one year we all decided to do homemade Christmas presents, and I decided to experiment with like prop foam. So it's the foam they use to make props out of for stages and for window displays. And you actually mix these two chemicals together, and then they come up and they form like styrofoam, and then it hardens and you can carve it. And I actually carved like a 4 or 5 foot long word Eucharisteo, and it sits up on above our dishes in our kitchen on top of the cabinets. And the reason I want to mention that is because my wife has done an amazing job of keeping a gratitude journal for really the last decade.
Wow.
And I'll bet you, Lawson, and the way she does it is she'll number it. Like she'll say 3 and then write it down in 4 and 5 and 6. And then every day she'll sit down during her quiet time in the morning and just keep the list going. So she'll pick up at 18 or 27 or 58. I'll bet you annually that list gets way over 1,000 or 2,000 entries every year.
Come on.
Every year.
Wow,
so
that's awesome.
For a decade, she's probably written down 20,000 things that she's thankful for over the last 10 or 11 years. And
Good for her.
it
Wow.
has really, I don't want to act like it changed our marriage because we already had a solid marriage. It's not like we went from this, awful existence to finally it was tolerable. But what it did was it made us both and our children just more grateful every single day. Every single day, it made us more grateful. And I'm super grateful to April for having started that pattern in our family because it's rubbed off on me, right? It's made me more of a grateful person. And I think over time, you mentioned this early on. I want dads to hear this. If we're not thankful, number one, you could make an easy biblical case that if we're not thankful, we're disobeying. Sorry, Dad, but if you're walking around every day unthankful, well, then, we just got to do a quick Google search on, thankfulness in the Bible. You're going to find 20 or 30 or 50 commands to tell you, hey, man, be thankful. So somehow we got to figure that out. But secondly, if we're walking around not thankful, everybody around us kind of knows it. And quite frankly, man, the believers, the Christians should be the most thankful people in the world. Because as my son will occasionally say, kind of flippantly, but he'll occasionally say, hey, worst case, I die. You guys get stuck with the baggage and you're sad, but I'm in heaven. And I get what he's saying. Nobody wants him to die, but I get what he's saying in that as a believer, the worst case is the best case. As Paul said, I'm torn between two things. I can stay here and keep ministering to you people, or I can go to heaven. In either case, I win, and I'm just going to do whatever God tells me to do. And so as a believer, man, our level of gratitude really does say something about our level of faith.
Yeah. Things that dilute our thankfulness, comparison, jealousy, anxiety. Philippians 4, 6 and 7, it starts with, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. So don't be anxious. I think anxiety is something that can dilute your thankfulness. I think busyness can dilute your thankfulness. You just got too much going on. Jealousy of things or relationships that you're missing or something that you feel like is lacking in your life contributes to the lack of thanksgiving. But I ask myself, why? Why would I want to be more thankful? Why would I want to be a person of gratitude? And why would you want to replace those things that dilute your thankfulness with things like contentment, with things like gracious giving, with acts of kindness? And it's because of Philippians 4:7. It says, let me repeat 6. Don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. 7, is, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So that's why. It is not so that you look around your house, which yesterday you felt like was crappy, and now all of a sudden God's giving you this ability to look around and go, yeah, I'm super content. It's because your heart. It's because of your heart that He wants us to be transcended. He wants our heart to be guarded. And I back to what we began with in the as we got going is, I think about my children. I want them to have a father whose heart is guarded. I want to be a father that walks through life with an attitude of gratitude, of contentment, and I want that peace in my heart, because I know that they will be the receiver, the benefactor of God's work in me, through me, to them, and that on their own journey that they can then, like you said, replicate.
Man, and a lot of times, Lawson, that's what you just shared is really powerful. And to your point, I want to be that guy who people sense, and they just know that when they're around me, I am a thankful person. And partly because, there's probably some pride in there where I want to be known as a thankful guy, but really, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But really, what I want the opportunity to be able to say, man, as like David said, so often in the Psalms, David would say, my God is my portion. He is my shield. He has delivered me. And there were a lot of Psalms when David was saying, how come my enemies have overtaken me? So there's a lot of the flip side of that feeling as well in the Psalms, but there's so much about what God's done. And deep down, man, if we're not thankful, it's kind of the way I look at it is like this. I had a friend one time who had this really, really nice house in Florida, off the coast of Florida, and he let me stay there for a week. And this is pre-Zillow, this is pre-internet, so I couldn't find out how much the house was worth, except that a couple doors down, that house was for sale. Remember those old boxes people would have in their yard where you had the flyers and you'd pull the flyer out and it would have pictures of the house and have the price of the house? Well, that's how I found out I was staying at a $4 million house. Because the one day, and I was trying to put the paper back in the box without folding it. I just didn't want to leave, because I was like, wow, oh my word. I could not have afforded 1 week's rental of this house. But this friend of mine who'd had a lot of success in the business world just said, oh man, go down there and stay as long as you like. Stay a week. I don't care. Just let me know when you're coming and when you're going. Imagine if while I'm down there at the house, I call him back and I'm like, hey, the shrubs out front, they're not quite round. They're kind of more like an oval. And it'd really be better if they were round. And I don't know if you noticed, but there was this one little piece of trim on the fourth step that kind of got a nick in it. Imagine if I were calling him back and saying all these things about the creation he's letting me stay at, and just being critical and picky, and oh my word, it'd be exhausting. And basically what that person would know is, wow, this cat is not very thankful. He is not very grateful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's often what we inadvertently do to God, right? He's given me a godly wife. He's given me 5 healthy sons. He's given me an amazing daughter-in-law. He's given me the opportunity to speak and write and teach and lead a nonprofit and have friends and hit a golf ball, just random things. And I go, man, the degree to which I don't gripe about my lot in life, and the degree to which I actually say, man, thanks a lot. What I did with that guy in that home, I sent him a card. I called him. I was super thankful. I've told him since then more than once, man, that place is amazing. If you ever need me to move there forever, I'm happy to do that. He's not taking me up on that offer yet, but hey, if you're out there listening, Matt, I'll be happy to move into that home tomorrow. I've already got everything packed. I'm happy to do that. My wife would love that. In fact, my wife would love me more. So basically, if you want to invest in my marriage, Matt, oh my God, what just happened? I just got way off track. But listen, here's a
shocker. Such a shock.
Such a shock. Speaking of off track, so my wife listens to our podcast, Lawson. Her favorite part is when you call me dumb. Just want to say how thankful I am for her being a faithful listener
That's
to
for
the
you,
podcast.
April. That's for you, April.
Whew. But End of the story. What I'd love for dads to know is, hey man, the degree to which we are thankful as fathers for our children, for their struggles, for their unique nuances, for their skills, their giftings, for our wives and our spouses, for our lot in life, for our job, for our home, for our income, whatever we are thankful for is like a fragrant offering back to the Lord. It's us saying to God, man, thanks for letting us stay at your $4 million mansion for a week, because man, I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful. And so Dad, I hope, especially if you're listening to this around the time of Thanksgiving, you get a free pass, right? Because you can just bring up thankfulness and everybody's like, oh, cool, look, it's seasonal.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
You're not even a total weirdo. If you bring this up in like March, you're just kind of odd, but do it anyway, because that's the kind of guy you are. But Dad, listen, if you're listening to this around Thanksgiving, just spend some time, man, reflecting and also sharing with those around you what you are thankful for, even if recently, and I'm thinking of a friend of mine who's had his spouse pass away. Even if in the midst of it, you got to say, man, I'm not necessarily happy this happened. I'm not necessarily happy, but I am thankful. I'm thankful for how God has sustained us through this tough time. I'm thankful that he's brought us closer together as we've walked through it all together. We can find joy in the darkest of times, but not because we're so great, but because we have, as the scripture promised us, we have the mind of Christ. So thank you, Lawson, for being with me today, man. I'm really thankful for you, brother. We've been talking about doing the podcast forever. And one of the huge benefits of doing the podcast is I get to hang out with you,
right on,
Hunter.
You too.
It's a blast to do it.
Yep.
And I'm really grateful for you. So thanks for being with us today. Dad, thanks for listening in. And tune in next week for our special guest interview with Chip Ingram, for whom we're also very thankful. Have a great week, guys. See you next week. Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.
You've been dozing off to the Father on Purpose podcast featuring Kent Evans and Lawson Brown. Now, wake up. Head over to fatheronpurpose.org for more tools that can help you be a godly, intentional, and not completely horrible dad. Remember, you are not a father on accident, so go be a father on purpose.